In this video, you'll get a peek at one of the least visited national parks in the entire country. It's Great Basin National Park, and it was created in 1986 by an act of Congress that was signed into law by the president. And it's located in a very remote part of east central Nevada. This is the Snake Range in eastern Nevada, the Snake Mountain Range. Right now I'm in Great Basin National Park. That comprises the southern part of the Snake Range. Through that valley is the Utah state line. This is one of the many mountain ranges in the Basin Range region of the country. So let's clear one thing up first, and that is probably what you're wondering. What is the Great Basin? Well, the Great Basin is several different things, and so that's why it makes it a little bit of a complicated question. It's one, an ecological province, an ecological region where similar plants and animals live. It's also a geologic province where it comprises a region of similar geology, of basin and range, of valleys and mountain ranges that are formed by tectonic activity. And it's also a hydrologic region where precipitation that falls never makes it to the sea. It remains inside this basin, trapped, whether it soaks into the ground or evaporates back into the air or collects into lakes. It never makes it to the ocean via rivers, which is what traditionally happens when precipitation falls on the earth. So those are three Great Basin regions. But when you think about the Great Basin, like the fundamental Great Basin, the core, the heart of the Great Basin, it's probably where all three of those regions intersect, where the ecological province, Great Basin, intersects with the geologic province and the hydrologic province. So Great Basin National Park lies in the heart of the Great Basin. It's in the ecological region, the geologic region, and the hydrologic region. So it's really quintessential Great Basin. So here are a couple bristlecone pines. Bristlecone pines are the oldest living non-clonal organisms on Earth. Some of them are up to 5,000 years old here. And we're going to be going to a grove of bristlecone pines that are very special. This trail is very high elevation. The road goes from the valley floor to the mountaintop, and the trail starts at 10,000 feet, so it is kind of kicking my butt right now. There's another old bristlecone pine. I don't think it's alive anymore. But this trail begins at the end of the road. But this trail goes to the bristlecone pine grove and to a glacier at the foot of Wheeler Peak, the tallest mountain in the range. So we're gonna check that out. It's only like 1,000 feet up and 4.8 miles round trip maybe, so it's not that bad. But again, the elevation, if you're not acclimated to it, it's an adjustment for sure. I don't live at a very high elevation like I used to, so I'm not acclimated like I once was. This one is fantastic. Wonderfully gnarled. Really old. Several thousand years old, probably. So like all living things in the Great Basin ecological region, the bristlecone pine is extremely tough. It's super hardy because it has to withstand really freezing temperatures, really high winds, hot temperatures too at times, extreme drought, very little moisture, and also extreme changes in climate because they live for thousands of years, that if something dramatic happens in the world, they've been able to withstand that. So they're so resilient. It's really amazing. The oldest bristlecone pine that we know of, because it was officially dated, like all the rings were counted, was actually found in Great Basin National Park, and it was nearly 5,000 years old. So think about that. That tree, which was named Prometheus, was born about 2900 BC. That tree would have been considered ancient by people we consider ancient. Like in ancient times, that tree was already ancient. Super windy here too. which is crazy. Think about all of the empires that have risen and fallen. Think about Cleopatra and Jesus and Leonardo da Vinci and Napoleon and you name it, the pyramids. I mean, this tree lived in one spot its entire life. I mean, all trees do. They don't get up and walk anywhere. That's what makes looking at trees interesting because if trees aren't doing well, then maybe the environment's changing or something because they can't just walk to a better location. Anyways, this tree lived in one spot its entire life and witnessed so much change, not just in human culture and human history, but in the environment itself. The weather was constantly changing. The climate was changing. There were little ice ages. There were huge volcanic eruptions that spewed immense amounts of ash into the atmosphere that blocked out the sun. There were extreme droughts. There were warm spells. There were cold spells. And we know all of that too because when you look at a tree's rings, they're not all evenly spaced. When the tree is growing in more favorable conditions, it grows more quickly. The rings are further apart. When the tree is strained and it's not growing in a very favorable condition, like if there's drought or something, the rings are more closely spaced together. So the bristlecone pines really have a complicated story to share. Unfortunately, they're also a really sought after commodity, and you're not allowed to, chop down a bristlecone pine, of course. But unfortunately, the location of the oldest bristlecone pines in the world, which are located out here in the Great Basin, can't be publicized because of the damage people have done and what damage people might do to these bristlecone pines. The wood is extremely dense and rot resistant. It does not decay. That's why trees that have been dead for 1,000 years, you can still see them perfectly preserved up here. So the trees are really remarkable in so many different ways, and that's why we have to protect them. One last thing I'll say about bristlecone pines is there's not that many of them. They're found in a very niche environment on windswept ridges and very high elevation mountains in very isolated areas between Eastern California and Colorado. So they're really not common. Okay, so now we're looking at Wheeler Peak, which is over 13,000 feet above sea level at the top, and it might as well be Nevada's tallest mountain because Nevada's official high point is Boundary Peak on the California border. And even though it's taller, technically, it's higher above sea level than Wheeler Peak, it's right next to a taller mountain across the border in California in the same mountain range, the White Mountains. So if you're on Boundary Peak in Nevada, the state's high point, it does not feel like you're at a high point. So for all intents and purposes, I think Wheeler Peak is the tallest mountain in Nevada. And it might as well be. It's so special too because it's got the only glacier in Nevada, only glacier left in Nevada at this point, right below the mountain. And it's a rock glacier, so it's covered by rocks, but it's still a big lobe of ice and it is moving downhill. So yeah, Wheeler Peak is kind of the center of Great Basin National Park. There's a lot of other parts to Great Basin National Park. In fact, the main reason why it was protected in the first place was because of the caves, the Lehman Caves. And before the national park was established, there was a national monument designated for the caves. So you can still visit those caves, but there's a lot of other things to check out. You can climb to the top of Wheeler Peak. It's a tough hike, but it's not super technical. There's a lot to do in Great Basin National Park. So overall, I highly recommend visiting Great Basin National Park if you're into this sort of thing. If you're into nature and going places that are off the beaten path, and if you have the time, because this place is out of the way. And that's probably an understatement. It's like a several-hour drive from any notable metro area like Las Vegas or Salt Lake City. It's not hard to get to. Like, the roads are nice and easy, but it's just not really on the way to anywhere. It is located along US Highway 50, which is a transcontinental route, but in Nevada, It's known as the loneliest road in America because it's so remote. There's so few services along this road. In western Utah, US Highway 50 is also very remote. But you'll go maybe hundreds of miles without seeing a gas station or any other services. Just outside the park is the tiny settlement, not even a town, a settlement known as Baker. And there's some very basic services there. There's food, a bookstore, there's a tiny, tiny farmer's market there once a week, I think. By farmer's market, I mean like two old ladies selling bread and jewelry. And then expensive gas, very expensive gas, of course. If you head about an hour west on Highway 50, you'll get to Ely, which is like a small city, a pretty decently sized town. In Nevada, it's a notable town. It's a mining town. And there's more services there. Since this place is so remote, that keeps the visitation low, and the lack of light pollution means the night sky is amazing. So if you like seeing the night sky, and the weather's usually pretty cooperative for that too because it's so dry, you can get a great window into the universe. I actually saw the best shooting star of my life in Great Basin National Park. It was in August during the annual meteor shower, whatever it's called. And it was this huge, glowing, like fuzzy orb, green orb that came across the sky. And then it split into at least a few different smaller green orbs. It was actually incredible. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. I'll leave you with some cool views of the drive from the park back to the Salt Lake City area, including Notch Peak in western Utah, which features the second tallest cliff face in the entire country, second only to El Capitan in Yosemite National Park in California. I didn't even know this mountain existed until I saw it and looked it up because it was so cool. There's even bristlecone pines on top of it, which makes it even cooler. So there's all sorts of cool sights you can see to and from Great Basin National Park.